that point. And so now I want to shift gears to the key trends that happened in the late 80s and 90s, which is one of the most important moments arguably in American media history, is this shift from the network era where Americans really only had 4 or 5 channel options, with the main big networks, NBC, CBS, ABC, right, was their only choices, to with the cable and satellite technologies, channel options explode. And by the time you get to the mid 90s, right, Americans have hundreds of channels to choose from. Right. So this radically changed the economics of the television industry. Instead of trying to appeal to a mainstream audience, right, and you don't want to offend anyone, you know, the industry term was least objectionable programming. What happened is you started to develop television niches, niche marketing strategies that appealed to audiences with tailored content, specific content. And the goal of this new marketing environment in the television industry was to appeal to people's identities, right? To elicit emotion. So it was less about getting the biggest audience and more about creating more intensive emotional relationships to your media brand. And so Fox News executives like Roger Ailes and Rupert Murdoch, kind of understanding where the TV trends were headed, they came up with this idea to use partisanship. I mean, an obviously giant reservoir of emotion, right, as a branding device, as a way to distinguish themselves in the crowded television market. So so that's the first trend, right? That's important. It's the proliferation of television niches. You had to have that to make something like a partisan conservative network possible. Otherwise, in another television age, it wouldn't have been practical. It wouldn't have been doable. The second trend that converges at precisely the same time is the uptick in political polarization in American society, the uptick of partisan identification in public life. And this started, of course, with the Nixon era, as I mentioned, but really took steam with Newt Gingrich's Republican Revolution in 1994, the 1994 midterms, when the Republican Party took back the House of Representatives and really stifled any liberal agenda that Bill Clinton, you could argue that he didn't really have a liberal agenda in the first place, but stifled liberal policy goals, right? And so that's the other thing. So if you mix this technological and industrial changes in American television, and you combine that with the political polarization, you know, the idea of creating a network based on conservative political identity seems kind of obvious, right? If you consider those two trends. Now, most scholars have mainly focused on those two trends, but my book really zeroes in on a third trend that I think is under-examined, which is the rise of tabloid media. So the 1990s wasn't just political polarization or technological innovations. It was a tabloid decade with the rise of, you know, Jerry Springer, you know, circus-like daytime talk shows like Ricki Lake and Jerry Springer, shock jocks like Howard Stern, and of course, Rush Limbaugh with talk radio. You know, you have the rise of reality television on Fox Broadcasting, which was owned, of course, by Rupert Murdoch. So you have this kind of trend toward more entertainment-driven media formats, and particularly in the journalism field. And there was a host of conservative TV projects that were trying to do what Fox did in terms of ideology and in terms of creating a niche based on political identity. But they, like their liberal journalism counterparts, decried infotainment. They decried the tabloid wave. And so Fox leaned into the tabloid wave, having, you know, Rupert Murdoch having his background in tabloid media, Roger Ailes, CEO of Fox News, having his background in daytime television. They understood how to incorporate these kind of lowbrow media formats and styles into political journalism, right? So it's the combination of all those factors that helps explain how they made partisan media compelling as television entertainment. And this is, you know, leads us to Donald Trump, right? He's really the logical conclusion of this synthesis between political populism and tabloid media. He you know, was a major figure in the tabloid paper scene in the 1980s in New York. He had one of the most successful reality television shows in the United States for 14 some years. And he was a full-blown character in the entertainment wrestling world, right? In their own narratives, you know, he was